Welcome to the Some Insights podcast.
SOMI stands for social media, of course.
I'm Dante Licona, social media strategist and consultant.
And I'm Matthias Lüfkens, founder of Digitips.
In this podcast, we talk to the people who manage social media accounts for organizations and executives. They all have interesting stories to tell.
The idea is to learn how they're managing accounts, how executives engage on each social media platform, and hear their tips and tricks. We want to learn from the best usage of social media.
Today, we're proud to have with us Pablo Perez Armenteros. Welcome to the show, Pablo.
Great pleasure to be here with you both.
Pablo is the team leader, audiovisual, graphic design, and web at the European Union's Intellectual Property Office, which is based in Alicante in southern Spain. He was previously head of social media at the European Commission and often shares EU history on his X account. It seems you also share satirical posts on the DG meme account.
We're friends. We're good friends. Mimi and myself. So this I have a corner there. So I'm really proud and I'm very happy of having a corner in their website. Yeah.
Pablo, could you tell us a little bit about your communications career? How did you end up in the European Intellectual Property Office?
I basically started my career as a journalist. Ended up covering new institutional and political, all this political aspect of it as a Brussels correspondent. Okay, in a moment, actually, I went to Brussels in a moment in which you could feel already that things were changing or about to in both sides of the communication wall. It was a moment where the eruption of social media was there already, and that it was a common agreement. There was a common agreement around that the institutions, or the way that the European Union institution, were communicating, needed to change as well a bit. So I was lucky enough, let's say, to be in the right place and at the right time. So when I joined the Commission in 2011, one of my tasks was to actually professionalize the professionalization of the social media communication of the institution, of the social media environment. And at that time, when I joined, we were a small team of three, part of the web team, of the web department. And when I left 8 years after, we were already a department. Social media was a department of around 30 people dealing with social media, with data monitoring and analysis, with graphic design, plus some over 60 around the commission departments and offices in member states that were focalizing, let's say, localizing the information either in national languages or by topic. So I would say that the things that we do there, the pillars we put in place back in those days, are still sustaining communication today, and not only social media communication, but communication overall. And I'm still proud, and I was very happy there. But after so much time in Brussels, and so much time not seeing, let's say, the sun, it was for me high time to come back to Spain, and the opportunity arise here at the EU IPO, and here I am helping out to communicate one of the key and most important enablers, let's say, of the European internal market, as intellectual property is, and to keep communicating about Europe, but from Spain, that is also a challenge sometimes.
IP, intellectual property, is not the most riveting content to share on social media. Could you tell us how your team makes IP fun?
For me, there's always a kind of a misconception that important things has to be complex, that technical things are boring, and that's not 100% true. Okay, in our case, we try to let's say break that mantra every day and at every occasion, and sustain by two main pillars. Okay, one is being useful, being practical for the usual suspect, okay, our loyal audience that are already interested in our topic. And then the second one should be talking about things that people can relate to, okay, for that audience that never heard about IP or about the EU IPO or about our role. So that those two pillars that are what are sustaining, let's say, everything when it comes to communication, and always, with that objective of trying to wake up the interest of different audiences. We say a lot here that IP, that intellectual property, is everywhere. So we decided to, instead of just saying it, to start showing it already, also. Okay, and I believe that that's key. And then IP lawyers and IP specialists are kind of humans too. So they love as well to have some fun with IP related topics. So those things, we try to take those things that people can relate to, being football, being sports, being iconic trademark brands, and to drive the interest towards intellectual property in that way.
Can you share with us some insights about your posting strategy and how do you decide what kind of posts you will post and at what time?
How we decide, everything is linked to, let's say, the objectives of the institution as a whole, and everything is linked, of course, or drive through our communication strategy. So basically, beyond the fact of being useful and practical for the day-to-day aspect of the IP users and practitioners, and normally what works better are newsworthy related posts, let's say, okay, when we jump into opportunities that rise around, when we can find that link about what's going on in the world and intellectual property. And then of course, we have those IP legal disputes that are always interesting because they talk about the brands that are with us every day, the companies we know, the companies we even care about, okay, or that we hate. So it goes to the guts. It goes to the feelings. We can talk about Mbappe, Shakira, about McDonald's. I don't know, Luka Doncic, Berlusconi. So it has a lot of implication with the things that we care about, and those are normally the posts that perform better. But as I said, our main core part of the strategy is to be useful and practical for the audience, and to get or to leave ourselves there in the public eye for the people to discover what we do. Those are the main two pillars.
Can you give us insights into your team structure? How big is your team, and the approval process of those social media posts?
We have a communication service here that is this is quite dedicated to communication as a whole. So we have indeed experts in the different fields, and on social media we have one colleague that is dedicated full time to the social media. But at the end of the day, everyone helps out a bit, okay, and we are all driving, let's say, in the same direction in the communication department, from the structure of the key messages, from the objective, the visual approach, or the audiovisual content that accompanies all the team. There are no silos. I know that is kind of a mantra that is repeated, but in here there are no silos. So all the communication experts, in a way, are aware of the importance of those communication channels that social media are. And when you're in the commission, of course, you produce information and content, and it risks you in a even if you don't want to. But here you need to create that content every day, because there are not that many daily, let's say, updates. And that's why we need to work all together, and that's why social media channels are super important for this institution and for us, because our probably the channels that help us out reach more people, or a bigger number of people. So um, everything needs to go in a way into the same direction. We all work together. And regarding, let's say, the approval process, at the end of the day, it depends all on the trust, and when you find an environment that is dominated by trust on the professionality of the people are part of the team, you can actually do your job in the best possible condition. So basically, we know the framework we can work up, the objectives, the priorities of the institution and of the office, and we act in consequence. So the approval is, let's say, as in any other institution, but we know our role, and it's a role that is respected and understood by everyone in this institution.
I love what you mentioned about trust as an enabler for communicators. Thank you, Pablo. In your craft, what does success look like?
For me, it's about being useful and practical, actually, to the audiences. Okay, to being able in a way to span the audience beyond the usual suspect, to put your institution, or your company, or the people that you're working for in the communication map, and doing it in a, let's say, in a sustainable way, okay, without putting in risk the reputation or the image of it, and to build something that can be, sustainable for the future, to put the roots, and that's where my expertise, let's say, lies, and that's what I've been dedicating my professional life to think about the future, something that can work and that makes sense in the present, that can be still, in place, or the roots for the future, so it can serve as a basis for the people who will come after you. Because if there's something that I have learned in my professional life, is that no one is irreplaceable, let's say.
Can you tell us a little bit about your personal post on X.com, these historic EU posts that you share? You seem to have access to a treasure trove of old footage and old ads, even.
Yeah, actually, yes, beyond, let's say, football and communication, history is another passion of mine. So I love to. I actually love to dig into archives to explore our past, because at the end of the day, it's always, helps you to understand the present, and even to look a bit into the future with some optimism, and that's something that I believe that we all need these days. And I realized, when I started this quest into the history of the EU, I realized that there are several milestones in the history of the EU with direct links to the situation that we see today in life and in politics, and to show how the EU overcame those situations, those crises. It helps the audience, helps you also to understand and to trust the project more. And that has always been one of my objectives, personally and professionally, when communicating, to recover, to maintain that people's trust in the EU project. That is our common project. And yeah, those old footage, those old ads, beyond that, they are always funny. They say more than it could be seen at a first sight.
Our listeners want to know how our guests deal with crisis. I'm sure you have faced many. What have you learned about crisis communications? Are there any practical tips you can share with our listeners?
My God, yeah. When you work in your communication, and especially on the social media environment, you basically are used to navigate in communication crisis times. It's like an everyday situation, and yes, I mean, yes, I have faced several crises in many different ways, and if there's something that I consider really important, is to have all the information, because yeah, I faced several crises in different ways, by having all the information at my disposal and by not having any information at all, or not knowing what was going on, if it was true or not. So my main tip is probably maintain the calm. Do not panic, because that will be in a way transmitted to your team, and it will eventually damage the trust on your communication to the public. So that could be the first one, and then verify the information. Collect all possible inputs and insight about the information. Analyze, the impact of the crisis, because there are certain crises that you will not solve, but that what you can do is to try to mitigate the effects that it can have. And also equally important is that most crises can be tackled in advance, or at an early stage, by implementing a proactive communication strategy, using calmer times to be open, to be transparent, to be helpful to media, to the audience, to be positive, to pass your messages, the messages that you want to pass in the way that you want to pass it. So you keep building that relationship of trust that in a way will be activated or will serve as a basis to mitigate the effects that those crises can have in your image. When it's not the same when the audience receive something like, "Oh, look at the EU, what has been doing in A, B, or C," if they have already received, information basically stating the positive side of the activities or the project that the EU is undertaking. So that for me is equally important, to build this proactive, implement a proactive communication strategy in parallel, not to wait when the crisis, exploit in your face.
Good point. Finally, a battery of standard questions we put to all our guests. Who's your favorite and most inspiring social media mentor?
If I would have to say one, I would say my dear friend Tom Moylan, probably, and I'm going to say two, but because Ian McCafferty is equally, one of the people that inspire me the most during my professional journey. Tom Moylan and Ian McCafferty, yeah.
And which are your 3 favorite accounts to follow?
Here I'm going to mention two journalists, okay? Two Spanish journalists that communicate in English mainly, but they are Beatriz Rios and Laura Zornoza. They are young. They communicate in a way that I love, and I love to follow their accounts, platforms. And the third one, of course, it's the meme.
Which are your preferred social media channels for professional and for personal use?
Okay, personally, I used to be Twitter, honestly, and it's still are, but LinkedIn is, I must say, is growing. It's growing on me. And professionally, I would say Instagram.
Do you have a podcast that you're listening to?
I really like the Europeans. I really like Trade Off. That is a podcast related to trade, but telling stories behind the scenes that I really enjoy. Um, and of course, there is a new podcast in town. That is the Show Me podcast that I listen with all my attention.
Do you ever disconnect, and how do you avoid social media burnout?
Well, I do. I do disconnect now. I do. Okay, it's much more easy, or it's easier to forget, let's say, about the job now than in my former position in Basel. But of course, family helps, and the beautiful Spanish weather helps as well to disconnect and to do not, or to avoid this social media burnout. So yeah, I would say, just open the eyes and enjoying the things that are beyond the digital environment, and that's how, what helps me to disconnect always.
And finally, in one sentence, what is your social media mantra?
Be useful and be practical and have fun. And if you ever feel that you are not in one of those, just stop, because honestly, it's not that important. You are not saving lives there. So yeah, be useful, be practical, and have fun.
Pablo, thank you very much for your time and your honest answers. This was the 5th episode of our SOMI podcast with me, Matthias Lüfkens.
And me, Dante Licona. Please subscribe and follow us on our personal accounts, and see you next time.